Here's what you're missing over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. Spotlight on Steve Sims, Superintendent of Gettysburg National Military Park, soon to be former superintendent. And many of us are sad about that. Steve, welcome to Addressing Gettysburg for your last time, your final time.
Thank you, Matt. It's my pleasure.
So let's start with the beginning, Steve. Where were you born?
This is going to be a long morning. So I was born in Tehachapi, California. So a small little desert town in California.
All right.
Yeah. So I think what they're famous for are apples and a state prison.
In the desert.
Apples, yeah.
That's weird. Okay.
Yeah. High desert. But yeah, it was a great place to grow up. Small town, 5,000 people. So yeah. So
you grow up in this small, so kind of like here, 5,000 people-ish, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's it like growing up in the desert? Because I've never visited, well, I've been to Las Vegas, but that's, I've never left Las Vegas, so.
That's dry.
What about all the crazy animals, though?
So it's high desert, pretty dry. Winter snow is about 2 weeks long.
Okay.
And it's just mostly dry. That's really it. Lots of wind. There's windmill farms in that hometown, too.
Really?
Yeah.
So, and what do you do, like, as a kid growing up there to pass the time?
Yeah. No, so we, you just get out on your bicycles and you just go drive around on your bicycles and, play with dirt squirrels.
Dirt squirrels?
Dirt squirrels.
Is that its own thing?
We'll play in the dirt and with squirrels.
Oh, gotcha.
We played sports. We, rode skateboards. It wasn't a lot to do, but definitely sports.
So, and I would imagine the town has, some water coming to it. So you've got grass and stuff around the town, right? Or is it basically like?
Yeah, there's no body of water.
No, there isn't.
In that hometown. No, it's, like I said, it's a high desert. So, it's kind of in the mountains, Southern Sierra Mountains. There's just, apple orchards, prison, windmills, just kind of a boring little town. It does have one of its claims to fame is there's this railroad loop. It's called the Tehachapi Loop. And in its day, it was an engineering feat to get the train up the hill. So the loop allowed the train to gain momentum to make it the rest of the way up to the elevation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, we're close to the Mojave Desert. So Edwards Air Force Base and the shuttle. So I got to see the shuttle land. We'd go see air shows out in the desert as well. So if you've ever watched The Right Stuff and Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier, that was out at Edwards Air Force Base. That was out in the desert.
So how long did you live there for?
So I was born there. And when I graduated high school, I left and never returned.
Okay. Did you not like it?
It's a great place to grow up. I don't think I would ever move back. But I still have family there, still living there in good old Tehachapi. I've been back. I guess it was a couple years ago I went back. But I don't go back all that often. My parents moved out. My brother moved out. So it's, I go back for death and babies.
Exactly. And weddings. And right. Yeah, it's funny because like once you leave, you really can't ever go back because it's not what you left.
It's a different place.
Yeah. People are moved on. People are dead. People have, moved to different parts of town or out of town, and it just businesses aren't there anymore. I had that experience when after the first time I moved here, and I went back to Jersey after, I don't know, a year maybe or 9 months or something like that to visit, and just things weren't the same,
And now, that reminds me. So my dad was a police officer, so he knew everybody. Small town, he's a police officer, and so I kind of got to know everybody as well. going back, it's like, all these transplants. Where'd you come from?
Right.
Which is probably how people felt about me when I moved into Gettysburg. Who are you?
Well, Gettysburg is big for that, yeah, being the transplant.
When I got this job in Gettysburg, I thought, it feels a lot like my hometown without all the history.
And sand.
Small community atmosphere.
Yeah.
People want to know who you are. They want to ask questions. They want to get in your business, which is fine. That's how I grew up.
So Gettysburg. So how did you like Gettysburg? You've lived in a lot of places, so we're jumping ahead here. We're going to go back, but you mentioned moving to Gettysburg, and it's probably how people felt when you moved here. But what do you think of? What was your initial impression of Gettysburg? I guess is my question.
My initial impression, it felt like home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt comfortable.
Comfortable, okay.
And, I think that's because of what I just said about my hometown. I'm like, I'm kind of, I read the paper. I'm like, small town. Yeah, this is just the atmosphere. And it kind of felt familiar.
Okay.
And you layer that with the history and the tourism, it doesn't become, it's not like my hometown anymore. It's just that fundamental foundation does. But, when you add in the history and the tourism, it's a different place in my home, obviously, and a much more exciting place. A lot more to do.
A lot more to do, yeah. There's always something going on here.
More than dirt and squirrels. So,
although we have our share of that, too.
Yeah, beavers.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
It's definitely been a phenomenal time here in Gettysburg. Phenomenal experience, and I'm going to miss it.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of us are going to miss you there, Steve. I've been seeing the comments on the video that we did last week on Little Round Top, and people are really happy with the job that you've done here, I think. Oh, and of course, there's always going to be your detractors, but that's part of public life, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. And I mentioned this when we did the tour. It's not about me.
Yeah.
And my sole focus is trying to do the right thing, which I know can be subjective, but trying to root that in law, regulation, policy, first of all, but using my team at the park, using the community to help inform decision-making. And, again, this is the public's place. It's their park. It's their history as well. And, I'm not the sole owner or autocrat of Gettysburg. It's a shared responsibility, and I delighted in sharing that, which, obviously makes things more complicated. You're going to, people are going to disagree, and that's just what it is. But at least I hope people felt heard and understood, even if we may not have agreed.
Sure. And I think that's the sign of somebody who's being fair oftentimes is someone who pisses off a good deal of people because you're applying the rules fairly. And it's like they may not like it, but you're being fair. Like, well, these are the rules. And that's really like, I've always been the type of person who's always finding his way around rules, But I think if you have to be in charge, right, you've got to follow the rules and you've got to enforce them equally. Because if you don't, that just is going to be a bigger headache for you as the person in charge. And it's also just not fair to everybody else. So if you're just going down the line and you're saying, well, this is what the law says or this is what the rule says, and so therefore my answer is yes or no, and then you do that same thing with the next guy, they could complain, but
yeah, and I think having an approach of fairness and consistency is appropriate. Trying to find areas of discretion where you can be creative is helpful. Being pro-social is helpful. And, trying not to treat every decision like it's a binary decision. There's usually a gray space.
Yeah, sure.
Or try to find that gray space. And where there isn't any discretion, you got to just be transparent. Let people know. And, I think in the beginning when I first got here, communication, and I accept responsibility for this, wasn't as good as it should have been. And being transparent wasn't as good as it should have been. And I hope over the time here that we've improved upon that, and that also builds trust in the community for Gettysburg.
I think it did. I mean, personally, I do
And I thank you for that, because
why is that?
You invited me on your podcast.
Well, well, thank you for coming on, because I honestly thought you'd be like, no, because how many times do you get a superintendent of a park to come on some, goofballs podcast? It's not often.
Twice in the last 7 days. I mean,
fair enough.
Well, and I think it's we can't undervalue the value of relationships.
Yeah,
and building those relationships. And I think that's something that I have grown into here in building those relationships, trying to be mindful and thoughtful of building those relationships, because they are important. And again, building trust, building consensus if you can, but making sure people understand that this is how things are ran, and you have a voice in that.
And I don't remember now. So let's see. During the time when we just had like interim superintendents, temporary over and over again, I was living back in Jersey. So the last time we had a permanent super was John Latcher. Well, that I was living here was John Latcher. So that was almost like 15 years ago, something like that. I can't do the math this morning. And I remember he was a pretty controversial guy, because he was just like, I'm going to do what I want to do and forget you, or at least that was the reputation he had. And people did not feel heard. People did not feel like this was their park. They felt like some fiefdom or something that they were living under, and people. So I guess that's part of the reason why I didn't think you would ever come on the show, was because my last experience with a superintendent was him. And now I wasn't doing a podcast then, and if I was, I don't think I would have ever thought to ask him on. But that was kind of the idea that I had, was that, the guys are the man in the high castle, and you're not getting out there with the people and stuff. So I was pleasantly surprised when you accepted it. And I know the audience really liked it, because again, we don't normally get to communicate with the guys in your position. And so I think it's kind of, maybe I'm using a big word here for this type of thing, but it kind of, at least in Gettysburg, revolutionized what the superintendent could be, and I would say should be, because
thank you.
Yeah, because it's such a close-knit community here, and the park is very much involved in a lot of things. I mean, it surrounds the town, right? I mean,
inextricably linked.
Exactly. And so for there to be an adversarial relationship between the locals and the park is silly to me. I never understood that. And so I did not feel, well, except for the fact that you made us not allowed to go out on the park at 10 o'clock at night. You took that away from me. But other than that.
Next week you can push somebody else.
Yeah, I'm going to. Believe me. But other than that, though, I did not feel like it was an adversarial relationship that you had with the people. And I appreciate that. And I think a lot of the other people out there do. And so I thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
All right, now let's go back to your life. So now you leave after high school. Where do you go?
Went to West Point.
West Point.
Yeah, interesting story in how I got into West Point.
Okay.
Not how I got in, but why I applied. So my junior year, we had a guy that graduated my high school. He went to not community college, but California State College University for 1 year, maybe two, and then he went to West Point. But then West Point will allow you to come back and get some extra days leave if you go to your home high school and talk to the students. And so he came back to our high school, and I knew him. And so I went and just listened, because I always had this propensity, I guess, for serving my nation, serving in the military. My dad was in Vietnam, got drafted. And so I thought, this is just something you do.
Right.
You serve your country.
And then you became a cop.
And
you serve your country, you serve your town.
Yeah, public service. And so went and listened to him, and I'm like, oh, it's free. It's free college, because at the time my brother was going to college. My parents took a second loan out on the house to pay for his college, and I'm still at home seeing the pain, if you will, or the impacts of a tight budget. And so I thought, I'm not going to do that to my parents. I can do two things, one stone, two objectives. I can go to college for free and serve my country. So I thought, well, I'll apply. And so I did the whole application process, and my football coach did the whole physical test for me. I'd go to Edwards Air Force Base for the medical, and
Listen to the rest of this interview and dozens like it, support the show, and get early access to special episodes, early and discounted ticket sales, and more. The second lieutenant level and above gets access to all monthly Patreon episodes. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, choose a tier, and join. And I thank you in advance.